Chester, big boy, up here. Let's go. Come on, big boy.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Man, what a beautiful morning it is here at Gatorland. Thank you for joining us for this vlog today. Today, folks, I want to tell you a story. A little story about Chester the Alligator.
Donnie.
Yeah.
Where are we going now?
We're going in with Chester, the big one. Biggest in the park if you're on my team, all right?
What?
Yeah, now Chester's a little cranky like always, but we're gonna go in and see what he's doing.
On the way out. On the way out.
You see, somewhere in the early 1960s, Chester was born down by Tampa, Florida. Oh, he had a great life growing up like young alligators do. Growing up in the ponds and streams and canals around Tampa, eating bugs and crickets and just having a good old life. Well, about 20 years ago, all of the human development started building houses and shopping centers around Chester's neck of the woods. Well, that's where the trouble started. So by this time, well, Chester was over 12 feet long, weighed over 500 pounds. Man, that's a big alligator. We're pretty sure that the people in the neighborhood there started feeding Chester down that pond that he lived in. Although they were well-intentioned, they were actually conditioning Chester to think that people are food, and everything around people is also food. And that's where he starts to lose his natural fear of humans. That's why it's against the law to feed alligators in the state of Florida. Creates a very dangerous situation. Now, since Chester thought that people provided food, well, then he also thought that them noisy little animals at the end of the leash were also his food, and that's where he developed a taste for dogs. Not just little dogs. Why, he ate big dogs like a Labrador and a boxer. It's what the stories tell us. And that's how Chester got his name, Chester, the big dog eater. So this was all in 2002. And at that time, there was a law here in the state of Florida that said that zoos and animal parks like Gatorland couldn't accept alligators from the wild. Now, that law was created back in the 1950s when alligators were endangered, and I guess they thought that we'd be running all over the state, grabbing alligators and throwing them in our ponds. Well, that just wasn't the case. But what has happened here in the 2000s is that alligators were plentiful. They were no longer endangered. There were millions of them all around the state. And those that were popping up around housing developments, they considered them nuisance alligators. Those poor gators are captured and euthanized. Well, hearing about Chester and his reputation, we wanted to save that big fella. I mean, it wasn't his fault. They built a housing development right next to his pond. So we reached out to the Florida Fish and Wildlife in Tallahassee and asked permission if the trapper could catch him alive, bring him here to Gatorland, thus changing that decades-old law. Well, it worked. The trapper was able to catch him alive, brought him here to Gatorland, and we put him out in our ponds to live out the rest of his life in alligator paradise. That made Chester the very first rescue alligator here at Gatorland, setting the stage and making him the ambassador for saving hundreds of alligators' lives all around the state from certain euthanasia. But the story doesn't end there. You see, Chester was a big old grumpy alligator. He lived his life in that pond by himself, only occasionally having to whoop some other gator that might have stumbled into his territory. Here at Gatorland, though, it's a lot different. We put him in our main lake and there's dozens of big bull alligators out there. Well, old Chester didn't like that. He quickly set out trying to whip all the other alligators out there. We were afraid that he was either going to kill another alligator or they were going to kill him. It was just a train wreck waiting to happen for old Chester. So we moved Chester to a beautiful bachelor pad. Oh, he had a private pond, a little grassy area he could sun himself. And occasionally we'd bring females in there to visit with him. He didn't like that much either. See, old Chester just liked being by himself, lying in his pond, sitting up on the grass and just letting food fall out of the sky all around his head. He thought that's the way a big gator should live. Well, Chester's grumpy personality soon became a fan favorite all over the park. Why, people could come in and go on backstage tours, and they were always entertained because he would blow and hiss and make a racket, and then his big old mouth was open. We'd throw some food in there and it would slam shut with a deafening pop. All people loved it. But you know what? His hearty appetite was also the creative force behind the Chester dog. That's a mountainous foot-long hot dog here in the park. It's covered with chili and cheese and macaroni and cheese and jalapenos. Oh man, I tell you, one way or another, old Chester's gonna get your heart. If you could end up eating one of those things, well, you end up only wanting to do what Chester liked to do all the time. That's just lay around in the grass, lay in the sunshine and go, ugh. So a few months ago, well, Chester lost his appetite and refused to eat. And that's not that unusual for large alligators, especially here in the fall as the weather starts to cool off. But those of us that love Chester and watched him every day, well, we knew something just wasn't quite right. So along with our veterinarian, we called in some other vets from around the state that specialize in big animals and especially large alligators. So in addition to his old age, together we all suspected that he had a blockage in his digestive system that was keeping him from wanting to eat. So those vets came in with specialized x-ray equipment and special tubes that could help us get pictures of him and to try to flush out his system. Well, unfortunately, we couldn't find the blockage, but we knew we had to do something, everything that we could, to try and clear up his system. So we set up an unprecedented treatment program here at Gatorland, one that we've never done. And in fact, I don't believe it's ever been done with any large alligator or crocodile anywhere in the world. So 3 times a week, we'd catch old Chester up and attempt to flush his system from both ends, from his mouth and up through his cloaca, using medications designed to clear up his system and to give him some liquid nutrition. All of this was done under the careful watch of some of the world's best alligator and crocodile veterinarians. He was just such a good boy. He'd let us put a ladder underneath him, lift him up out of the water just a little bit, insert the tubes to try to flush his system. I think old Chester knew we were trying to help him. So back before Christmas, Chester climbed out onto his favorite sunny spot. Man, we were sure excited to see him up there. So we left him up there that afternoon just to soak up the sunshine. Well, when we came back that evening, old Chester had passed peacefully. Lots of tears were shed around the park as the news spread. The people that loved him and cared for him and worked so hard to save his life, we found out that he'd passed away. There'll never be another Chester. Chester was destined to be euthanized over 20 years ago. Instead, he became an ambassador, saving hundreds of nuisance alligators' lives all over the state. Chester showed millions of people that alligators have unique, beautiful personalities, and although we fear and respect them, they can also be loved. So thank you, Chester, for being the amazing character that you were, for blazing the trail to save so many alligators' lives, for showing the world how awesome alligators can be, but thank you especially for coming into our lives here at Gatorland. Animals like Chester are the reason we do what we do. Man, we're sure gonna miss him.